Hello, this is a recording primarily for the Suffolk Jungian Circle, but also, as with all the previous recordings, for anybody at all, wherever you live, who might be interested in the theories of Carl Jung. So do feel free to post, comment, we can get a discussion going that way. But the topic for this month's Suffolk Jungian Circle is dreams and Carl Jung's theory of dreams and how they work. So this is just a sort of a reflection on a few points that we can discuss once the members have listened to this, and bounce around the ideas I put here as well as their own ideas and understanding. So to start with a little bit of historical background, if we go to the ancient world, dreams were thought of in all sorts of different ways, but frequently they were thought of as rather prophetic, having sort of predictive powers. People dream of the future and have visionary dreams. Gods and goddesses and spirits and whatnot might be deemed as talking to them in their dreams. Then as we moved towards a much more rationalist period of history, at least in the Western world, materialist conceptions of the universe, materialist ontologies took dominance, and the notion increasingly became widespread that dreams were basically just random nonsense. Your head full of rubbish that didn't really mean a damn thing, and they weren't worth studying, they weren't worth thinking about. Freud, when he came to prominence, took a more traditionalist point of view. Not that he was saying dreams were prophesying the future or communing with gods, but in the sense that he started to revive this idea that dreams were indeed meaningful. They weren't just random noise and nonsense, and that they were worth paying attention to and recording and a means of communication with the patient. He took the idea that dreams were the unconscious mind's way of communicating with the conscious mind, and that whilst the conscious mind speaks in terms of language and concrete ideas, concrete conceptions, the unconscious mind is non-verbal and communicates in imagery rather than in language. For Freud, the imagery is invariably symbolic. So if you dream of a dog, if you hear any strange noises, that's the dog chewing himself in the corner. So if you dream of a dog, it's not literally about a dog. Even if you happen to have a dog, or you dream of a dog you used to have years ago or whatever, you're not actually dreaming about the dog. The dog is a metaphor, a symbol for something else. And Freud had his own various conceptions as to what that something else would be. But it's very much internal to the culture in which the individual lives. So for Freud, there is a notion that there are cultural conceptions that say somebody is Chinese, that dogs in China will be a metaphor for one thing, whereas if the dreamer were Spanish, then dogs in Spain would be a metaphor for something else. So part of the analysis is to understand the culture from which the patient comes, and that will then help you understand how their mind is immersed in that culture and how dreams come to the fore, and what this image, that image, some other image means for the individual. Jung, when he first became a student of Freud, largely agreed with that, but as their period of time together drew towards its close, they were moving further and further away from each other in terms of what Freud felt versus what Jung felt. One of the things that Jung started to disagree with Freud about was the nature of dreams. And this cultural issue was one of the sort of aspects of disagreement, that whilst he... thank you, dog. Blundering lump. Whilst he felt that there were cultural elements at play, because obviously he has this idea of the collective unconscious, which interacts with culture in quite a marked way. Nonetheless, he felt primarily the images in dreams were specific to the individual. So if you've got this Spanish patient, it's not sufficient to know what dogs commonly mean in Spain. You have to know what dogs mean to this individual person. So maybe in one culture there's so you've got a British person, in Britain, dogs tend to be regarded as symbols of loyalty, fidelity, devotion, friendship, etc. But if the individual patient that you're talking to, or an Alisand, whatever you want to call them, let's say this person was bitten by a dog some years ago and they were very traumatised by the experience, and now they're scared to death of dogs, to them the dog would not be a symbol of loyalty and friendship and all those things. The dog might be a fearful symbol, a threat to something dangerous that they're scared of. And so you would have to understand the image as it is unique to the person, not necessarily just at a sort of a collectivised cultural level, and what it means at that level. So it's the individual's own unconscious mind. Jung agrees with Freud on this one. It's the unconscious mind communicating with the conscious mind, trying to make itself known and make its needs known and so on. But it's doing so in a very personalised language rather than in a culturally generic language that would be understood by many, many other people. So that's the first sort of element in which there's a disagreement going on between them as to quite what they are. But he did say there's this, well, it's not that little a quote, it's a fairly long quote, but a quote in which he does express his view, which is in agreement, in harmony with Freud, that the study of dreams isn't a game, it's not nonsense, it's a worthwhile, meaningful thing to do. But he uses the phrase, it's not a parlour game. What he wants to emphasise is that if you look into the unconscious mind, and this is where it gets a little bit Nigerian, you kind of stare into the abyss and the abyss stares back into you. Studying the unconscious mind isn't fun and games. Because, see, for a lot of people, they talk about their dreams. Oh, what do you think this means? Oh, what do you think that means? And there is an element of fun about it. It's a kind of something you might chat to with a friend or some random stranger you're talking to on the bus, and take it quite lightly. Whereas Jung says you shouldn't really take it lightly, because it could mean something quite grim, quite horrendous, quite challenging, that might upheave that person's understanding of themselves and their lives. If they really grasped the inner meaning of the dream, it might quite shock them. I mean, some dreams may be relatively light and fluffy, but there are going to be some dreams that are quite heavy in their content. So when you approach the study of dreams, it should be done in the line of something that could open up a can of worms. And so you need to think to yourself, do I want to open up a can of worms with this random stranger sitting next to me on a bus? Or should I wait for a more appropriate occasion and open up that can of worms when I've got the necessary support around me to help? And so it becomes a bit more of a sort of a weighty thing to do. And sometimes he says that the meaning isn't always deeply symbolic. It's another area he disagrees with with Freud on. That whereas Freud said that dog is never a dream about a dog, it's always a dream about something other than a dog. Jung says, well, sometimes a dog is a dog. To paraphrase Freud, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. And it may be that that occasion when you got bitten by a dog 10 years ago is still traumatising you, and you still need to go through it and kind of process it, to sound all a bit Californian, and deal with the experience you're having, because you haven't quite done so yet, and that's why it's bubbling up in your unconscious mind. So sometimes these things can be taken in quite a literal fashion for Jung, rather than everything having to be a metaphor for something else. Although he's not precluding that some things might be metaphorical, he's just saying it's not as automatically given as it is for Freud. Another element of disagreement he had with Freud is that Sigmund felt that dreams were largely amoral. They were just sort of throwing up images from the unconscious mind. There was no sort of morality to them. So if somebody had a dream of murder or sexual abuse or something horrible, there was no moral content. It wasn't saying this patient is a terrible, wicked person who wants to go around and engage in dreadful acts. It was to be understood in a much more neutral fashion. Whereas for Jung, dreams are directive. Now he doesn't go along with this ancient idea of dreams as prophecies and predictions of the future, but he does say there is a sort of prognosticating element to dreams, but it's more in the way that a doctor might offer a prognosis for an illness rather than the way in which a clairvoyant would predict something that's going to happen in 6 months' time. In that, a bit like Sherlock Holmes, you can look at a chain of events and say, well, this happened, this happened, this happened, therefore very likely that's going to happen next. And it's not because you're psychic that you're able to work out what's going to happen next. It's because you're looking at a logical chain of events and where that chain of events is likely to lead. So the dream is flagging up to the conscious mind where a chain of events is leading to, where things are going to happen. So it can be directing the dreamer to a particular course of action, or warning them off a particular course of action. So if you keep doing this, then so and so awful thing is going to happen. So it's not moral in the finger wagging preaching sense of being very, very sort of sermonizing, but they are giving guidance to the dreamer on how to have a better life, how to be a better person, either by avoiding a negative course of action or by following a positive course of action, kind of encouraging them, egging them on towards a positive course of action. So it's significant there. He did agree with some of the older views in that he recognised a strongly somatic and a strongly environmental element to dreaming. Somatic in the sense that bodily experiences, if that's not too strange a way of phrasing it, will have a direct impact on dreams. So if you are in pain, you've got a bad back or something, that pain will manifest within your dreams. If you're suffering indigestion, that will manifest in some way within your dreams. So the issues of the body do creep into dreams, and some dreams are, there's nothing particularly profound or mystical or whatever about them. They're just noting the fact that you are in discomfort in some fashion, some issue. And environmental in the sense that sounds and things going on around you when you're asleep are likely to creep in. So if there's you're deeply asleep and a couple of drunks are having an argument in the street outside your bedroom, elements of what they're shouting at each other might start to creep into your dreams. Or if an ambulance whizzes past with a siren going, that siren might start to creep into your dreams. Not because it's meaningful and profoundly significant necessarily, but because it was happening in the environment around you. So dreams are a mixture of quite practical, straightforward understandings of internalised and externalised phenomena, but also the unconscious mind sometimes trying to get a message across, trying to communicate in some way and make itself known for what's going on, or what it would like to be going on in the life of the individual. So there's levels of understanding there. He does break dreams down into 4 stages, 4 aspects, which are worth brief note. He says dreams start with exposition. So when he's encouraging somebody to write their dreams down in a journal the next morning, and then he's reading through it or getting the patient to read it aloud, he's looking for the exposition. What is happening? What's the who is in the dream? Is it a dream about you? Is it a dream about other people, about animals, about places? What's explain what the dream is? And so the first part of the dream is you encountering a particular setting, a particular group of characters. It sets the stage for what the dream is about. That then moves into the action phase where things start happening. So the people or the animals or the monsters or whatever they are, they're not just standing there like lemons, they start doing things. They start to interact, and it's important for Jung to know what the actions are, what is going on here. Are people being helped? Are they being hindered? Are they being entertained? Are they being threatened? Are they being healed? What's the action process? What's the sequence of things going on? Then it will reach a third phase, the climax, where the sort of central act, if you like, takes place. The key issue in it comes towards a conclusion of sorts. Now, some dreams, he said not all dreams, but some dreams move into a fourth and final stage, the lysis. That lysis, the final stage, is where the dream begins to explain itself to the dreamer, where it starts to make sense to the person. So almost to a degree, they don't necessarily need an analyst to explain it. They just need to recall that lysis stage where things start to make sense to them, at least sense in the context of the dream, even if maybe that dream by waking standards would be really weird and odd and peculiar, but within the context of the dream itself, it starts to have that explanatory phase. Where somebody wakes up without a lysis, or at least they can't remember what the lysis is at any rate, then Jung feels that the dream is incomplete and is likely to repeat itself again on some other night, and eventually, at some stage, it will move towards having that lysis episode. And it's the dreams with the fourth lysis episode that are particularly worth noting, because that they are the ones that give you the real insight into what's going on in this person's mind and what the key factors are at play. Going back to this issue of linking to the individual, what does the dog symbolise in the dream? If the person were to have another dream 6 months later about a dog, it wouldn't automatically mean the same thing as the first dream 6 months earlier with a dog. So that whatever it is that the dog represents in the dream might have changed. And so this is part of Jung's rejection of those dream manuals you can buy in most bookshops, where usually it's an A to Z and you look up dog or elephant or potato or whatever it is you dreamed about, and it'll say, oh, if you dream about an elephant it means this, if you dream about flying it means that. For Jung, that's far too formulaic. Dreams, he says, are not that formulaic. The understanding of the dream comes through talking about it, not through opening up a book, going down an A to Z and going, oh, that's what it means. If it's a Freudian book, you can guarantee 99% of the meaning is going to be sexual anyway. So the meanings have to be nuanced and tailored to the individual rather than generic and formulaic. So you can't really have a Jungian A to Z of what dreams mean, because that would be missing the whole point of what Jung is saying about the nature of what dreams mean in the first place. So it has to be understood in a different context, in a different meaning. The dreamer, in discussing the meaning of the dream, needs to agree or assent to a meaning. So it is a not uncommon practice in Freudian analysis to apply Freud's notion that people do not fully understand themselves. We're too close to the woods to see the trees, or too close to the trees to see the woods, whichever way around that goes, I can't remember now. And that you need the analyst with the sort of psychological distance that they have to say to you, this is what your dream means, because you won't be able to really understand it yourself, because your own biases and prejudices and neuroses and whatever cloud your understanding. You need an external point of view, an expert. Whereas Jung is suggesting that it doesn't fully work if an expert just tells you what your dream means and you go, oh, thank you very much, doctor, and agree with it in this slightly submissive, sheep-like fashion. Rather, you explore, you discuss, the patient can say, well, I don't think that's right. Client, patient, whatever you want to call them, can agree or disagree, and you can bounce ideas back and forth, back and forth. They can offer their own interpretations of what things might mean, and then come to a point where they think that the discussion they've had with the therapist has given them the insights that they're looking for. So it's not that the insight is dictated to them by the authoritative therapist, Rather, it's a mutual dialogue between therapist and client to work out what it is that this dream means. Sharing ideas, exploring ideas, and of course, because it's unique to the individual, you can't just open up that A to Z, look down it, and say, "Oh, this is what a cat means in a dream." You've got to work out what the cat means to this individual, not to umpty thousand million other people, but to this individual. You've got to work with them to find out their experience. You can't tell them what their experience is. There's a bit of a difference. This process of talking about it and looking into it and so on is what Jung refers to as amplification. You sit, you discuss, you amplify the potential meanings of various images in the dreams and the sequence of events in the dreams and so on. And you come to, or at least the client comes to an understanding of what it is about. And it starts to fall into place, and the meaning becomes apparent through that process of two-way discussion, two-way exploration and understanding. He talks about the phases of object, subject and transference as having relevance as well in the process of dreaming. And of understanding dreaming, in talking about it afterwards. So the object of the dream is, well, usually the dreamer, but it could potentially be others as well. Who the key player is within the dream, identifying the sort of significant characters within the dream. The subject is the person themselves, how they are responding to what's going on in the dream, both at the time that they were dreaming, but also now that they're talking about it, hours or days or however long afterwards it is, and experiencing it. And transference is, as it is in general Freudian context, psychoanalytic context, the relationship that the client-patient has with the therapist. So do they see the therapist as domineering and bossy? Do they see them as kind and helpful? Do they see them as sexually desirable? What do they see them as? And how they see the therapist will shape how they agree, disagree, respond to the suggestions made by the therapist about the content and the meaning of the dreams, and also help the therapist, if they sit back and think about what's going on, to understand the nature of the transference, and if it's becoming an unhealthy transference, to identify that fact and then try to steer the transference in a more constructive direction to avoid any sort of unhealthy attachments or unhealthy anger and rebellion and whatever else it is that the client is projecting outwards onto the therapist. So there's those phases going on there. He does bring in all, which to some extent may seem contradictory to what I've just said about moving away from the cultural understandings of certain dream imagery, because he does bring in archetypes. So you could have a dream about some big archetypal image, a trickster figure, a mother figure, a father figure, a child figure, whatever it may be. The various different archetypes he talks about crop up within dreams, and dreams are a way within that kind of dream world of encountering archetypes and developing a relationship with those archetypes, good, bad or otherwise, processing and understanding of the archetype. So some of the figures in the dream may be archetypal figures, and obviously archetypes do exist at a collective level, in that there is a cultural understanding of what a shadow is, or what a child, the pure eternus, is within different cultures, and understanding the culture your client comes from may give you insights into their archetypal awareness and understanding. But that archetypal experience is still nuanced to the unique patterns of the client's own life. So whilst there may be broad cultural understandings of the mother archetype, the individual relationship this person has had or continues to have with their mother which could be good, bad, whatever, will shape, colour their dreams. So it'll be their experience of the archetype, not some kind of generalised, standardised, this is what everyone in that culture is meant to experience by this archetype. It doesn't work in that broad picture, but having an understanding of the broad picture will assist the therapist in looking at some of the issues that may be cropping up in the dreams and kind of playing themselves out in various different capacities. So all of that is brought to bear on understanding the dream process. He does favour the idea of dream journaling, of people having a little notebook or a dictaphone or whatever by their bed, so that when they wake up bleary-eyed, they can quickly jot down their dream before it dissipates, which is usually what happens with me. Actually, I forget it before I get the chance to write things down. So getting into the habit of having a recording of some description whilst the dream is still fresh in the mind, and then that can be looked back on in days, weeks, months, years ahead, and reflected back on, and particularly if you've got a record of dreams over a reasonably long period of time, you can see if certain dreams crop up again and again, certain action sequences or certain images crop up a lot, or maybe you can, again, by noting the date of the dream, then relate it to events that were going on at that time in your life, and see how the imagery connects to what was happening to you in the days leading up to the dream. It becomes a useful practice for self-reflection and self-understanding. I think that's probably pretty much covered the main points. There are other things that Jung said about dreams, but we can leave that for discussion within the group when we meet at the end of the month. And if anyone listening to this would like to participate in the group, would like the link to join in with the video discussion, and do shout, leave a message, and I'll send a link across to you. But I think we'll leave that there for now, and hopefully it's been useful, bringing out a few ideas worth discussing and expanding upon in the circle when it meets. Thank you.